So we're going to talk about behavioural economics and human emotion. So this is a relatively new part of investing. So if you look at the greats, the Warren Buffetts, the Benjamin Grahams, the Peter Lynch's, Jim Slater's, they don't necessarily talk about behavioural economics. It was really only until Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow came out and it won a Nobel Prize in the 90s that we really started talking about human emotion, how this affects investing. It seems really obvious now, but it's this is a relatively new field, but it's super important to understand how we as humans are affected by our investment decisions. So basically we're rubbish investors. So we're all humans and we're emotional creatures. The main takeaway is that we're all rational, so we're not rational. So the stock market is rational. All the economic models of the past have thought of humans as rational characters, rational people. But think of your family, think of your work colleagues, even think of yourself going to buy food when you're hungry. You make silly mistakes that if you look back, you're like, oh, that's really obvious why I did that sort of thing. But behavioural economics is essentially why we make decisions, because we're emotional creatures. So using the examples from Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, this Nobel Prize winning book, there's 4 things that we need to think about when we're investing. So, and these are overconfident, bias, judgement, herding, and loss aversion. So previously people talk about efficient market hypothesis, and that basically means that the market is efficient. There's always going to be, supply and demand will always equal out, and the price will always be efficient. The number of buyers, the number of sellers will always be efficient. But basically the new thinking is now that although there still is some truth to this, there is obviously supply and demand is still, the laws of supply still work, but we need to consider our human behaviour as well. So the first one is overconfidence. So we think we're cleverer than we are. We're humans and we make mistakes. Think of if you ask how good you are at driving, majority of people think that they're better than average drivers, where that statistic can't add up, because everyone, there's got to be some bad drivers and some good drivers, but there was a survey done and most people think they're better drivers than they actually are. So this is overconfidence. So we think we're better investors than we are, and this is me included as well. So basically deny the role of chance, and also hindsight bias as well. So I used to trade gas, and we used to document everything. Why are we making this decision? Because the next day it's so obvious. People come in and say, it's so obvious that the market's going to go down or the market's going to go up. Why did you make this decision? But then we can go back to, at this time in the moment, our kind of rationale was this, A, B, C, and D, and we have to explain our rationale. This is the same with investing. So hindsight bias. So the 2008 crash, we can look back and think, it's obvious that some of these markets were overpriced, and etc., etc. But yeah, as I said, we humans kind of we have overconfidence, and this is including the fund managers. Neil Woodford, a good example at the moment, where he basically overestimated how much he thought he was a better investor than he actually was. So that's number 1, overconfidence. Number 2 is bias. So we're biased to different judgments. So there was basically, we think we're spotting patterns when there's not patterns there. So there was a study done where people were flipping coins, how many tails and how many heads there were, and they got people in thinking, that's like pattern. We can see these patterns. And they thought they were being really clever spotting these patterns, but it's completely chance. Flipping a coin, if it's heads or tails, is just pure chance. So we forget about this when we're investing. So we're thinking we see spot patterns, and we think that we can control our decisions when actually we can't. So actually nature is more in control than we think. So number 3 is herding. So we like to be part of a group. We're humans, we're kind of tribe creatures. We like to be part of a group. And then if we see lots of people doing one thing, we kind of think, we've got to get on this bandwagon and do the same thing. Look at Bitcoin. Lots of people, not saying Bitcoin's right or wrong, but once the kind of positive feedback loops, you see someone getting 10% returns, and then you want those 10% returns, and then the next person, your other friend, wants that 10% return, and you get these positive feedback loops when there's actually potentially no intrinsic value behind what you're buying. This is herding. So we like to do things that others do. We like to be part of the tribe, and we like to copy each other. Think of the new shiny toy at Christmas. There's always a new toy that comes out. There's always a rush to get this new toy, and there's never enough toys for every child in the country. This is kind of everyone kind of rushing to this kind of shiny object. This happens in investing as well. And then fourth, and potentially the most important thing, is loss aversion. So what do we mean by loss aversion? So this means that we're more, a loss of something is more powerful than the same gain of something. So if you lose a pound coin, that's more painful to you than if you find a pound coin. So it's 2.5 times as painful to you. So this is like, if you buy a share or collection of shares and these come down, you're going to feel much more pain than if those shares go up the same amount. So we need to know this in investing. So 2008, when the markets crashed, there was a massive pain. Everyone was in pain, loss aversion, and everyone was like, they get this kind of, we talk about the 3 brain model in another video, and basically this kind of ancient part of the brain kind of releases a chemical, and we kind of fight, flight, or freeze. It's like seeing a bear in the woods. We kind of run away from this scary thing. We've evolved. The brain's evolved to keep us alive and keep us out of danger. So we're basically more likely to, if we see something scary, we're more likely to run away from it than if there's the same thing like a tasty treat, then we move towards this tasty treat. So this is loss aversion. So basically, we've evolved to run away, and we need to understand this in investing, and we almost need to be counterintuitive. Sometimes this doesn't make sense when in the long term it does make sense. So a way to get around all this is to automate our finances. So drip feed money into the market each month. Essentially, you can get away from the human element that essentially we make silly mistakes in the heat of the moment. And if we automate our investing and set up automated and systems in place to get away from this is really powerful, and this will help our investing in the long term. So just to summarise, behavioural economics and human emotions, basically we're rubbish investors, and by knowing this, we can set up systems to avoid this. So we're overconfident, we have biased judgement, we like to do things that the herd are doing, so we have herding, and there is loss aversion. So these 4 things, once we understand this and know this can be really powerful for our investing.